Okay, let's just get everything set up here. Hopefully my slides will appear on the screen very shortly. Hi everybody, if anyone who doesn't know me, my name's Toni. I've been coming to church for quite a long time now, and I get to share with you today the third part of this series, which is all about the one anothering in the New Testament. And this series is based on this verse, so I popped this up to start with, so I'll just read this through again. So it says, "So now I'm giving you a new commandment. Love each other just as I have loved you. You should love each other. Your love for one another will prove to the world that you are my disciples." And so far, as Sean pointed out, this is the third part of this series. Firstly, a couple weeks ago, we had Steve talking about how we love one another and talking about the eros and agape love. And Ramon last week talked about having his mind. And this week, we're talking about offering his welcome. But before we move into this any further, I just want us to remember the why. Like, why do we love each other? We love each other because God first loved us, because God is love. And somehow this verse kind of suggests that the way that we treat one another here, how we love one another, can show other people who Jesus is, and that's pretty cool. So a couple weeks ago, Steve talked about how we tend to default to the eros love, how this love where we want something back in return, we love with some kind of expectation, but actually how Jesus is asking for more than that, for this agape love, for us to love fully without expecting anything in return. And I've got a couple of definitions here on the screen just to remind us of that. So the first one is, agape love is the compassionate commitment of the heart to delight in the soul of another and to will that person's good ahead of your own, no matter what the cost to yourself. So that's quite a special kind of love. And we've got another quote here from the amazing C.S. Lewis. Agape love is unconcerned with the self and concerned with the greatest good of another. Agape isn't born out of emotions, feelings, familiarity, or attraction, but from the will and as a choice. Agape requires faithfulness, commitment, and sacrifice without expecting anything in return. And as Steve pointed out a couple of weeks ago, that's not our default way of loving. We like to have something back in return. And I think we just kind of acknowledge at this point that to love people like the way that they're asking us to, that's going to take us some Holy Spirit empowerment, because it's very tricky for us to do it in our own strength. And as you saw, the title for today's talk is Offer His Welcome, but today we're particularly talking about offering his welcome inside the church, but obviously these concepts do also run for people outside of the church as well. Now we're going to start this by looking at the start of Acts, the first group of Christians, should we say, the early church community, and look briefly at how they lived. Now it's just a few verses, but it's huge, and there could be about 4 sermons on it, so I'm just going to pick out a couple of things from it. So I'm just going to read this through in case you can't see it on the screen. This is from Acts 2. All the believers devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship and to sharing in meals, including the Lord's Supper, and to prayer. A deep sense of awe came over them, and the apostles performed many miraculous signs and wonders. And all the believers met together in one place and shared everything they had. They sold their property and possessions and shared the money with those in need. They worshipped together at the temple each day, met in homes for the Lord's Supper, and shared their meals with great joy and generosity, all the while praising God and enjoying the goodwill of all the people. And each day the Lord added to their fellowship those who were being saved. Now, as I said, there's loads in that portion of scripture, and I'm not going to pull it all out, but I just wanted to pull out a few things that we see the early believers doing in their community. They shared everything, including food and money. They worshipped together and took communion. They ate together. They let people in. They opened their homes. It says there they added to the fellowship those who were being saved. It was an open community. And basically, they formed this really good community. So we're just going to think about this term now, this community. What does that mean? I hear quite a lot of people saying that they want this. They want more community than they have now. Being a part of community is attractive. It's an attractive thing. We want it. We want a place to belong, where we have strong connections, where we know we are loved and accepted as we are in our imperfections, where we can know others and be known without fear of rejection. The desire that we have to belong is really strong in us. And I started to say, that is happening here in this church. I can see it. I could really spend the rest of this morning giving examples of where that's happening, but I'm just going to give just a couple. I know there's at least one person, probably more than that, who comes here on a Sunday morning who specifically looks for people who are sitting on their own, and they will often join them and make conversation just to make sure they're not feeling left out. There's at least one family who I know sometimes cook extra on a Sunday so that they're ready to invite new people or people on their own over for lunch. I'm not going to name them because they might not want all of us over for lunch, so I will let them stay quiet about that. One fantastic example that I wanted to give was for one of our sisters who passed away sadly just a couple of weeks ago, Michelle. I don't know if some of you remember, but she got baptised, it was about a year ago, I think, I'm not entirely sure. And she'd had a bit of a rough life, she had a really rough life, and it was difficult for her to stand on the stage. So the women who had been her community came up and stood on the stage with her, and that to me was really powerful. And although actually standing with her might not have been that much, but that was a real example of how they had stood with her practically in many ways before and after that moment of her being baptised. And that also, they walked with her, I know they did. They walked with her as Jesus gently and beautifully restored her and set her free from a lot of things. So thank you, everyone, all of those ladies and everyone else who does so much to form community and be there for people in this place. That's what we're talking about. That's that agape love that we're talking about this morning. Again, I could give many more examples, but then that'll be all I said, so I won't. But there is also room for more. And I know there are people here who don't feel like they're in much of a community at the moment, and they would like to be. So what can we do about that? And more importantly, or to start with, why should we do something about that? Now, I've got another quote here. Again, I'll read it just in case some of you can't read it, but I found this one really helpful. We can't follow Jesus alone. Jesus did not have a disciple, singular. He had disciples, plural. The call to follow Jesus was, and still is, a call to join his community of the way. And by following Jesus together, not alone, we are able to discern Jesus' truths from the devil's lies, help one another override our flesh by the Spirit, and form a robust community of deep relationships that functions as a counterculture to the world. There's a lot in there, but I'm just wanting to pick out a couple of things. Most importantly, we were never supposed to follow Jesus on our own. An essential part of following Jesus is being part of a community of others who are doing the same. Jesus was perfect, yet he still had a community. He had his disciples, and he had these three people who he was closest to. We need each other. We need each other for support. We need each other for protection, for encouragement, to tell us if we're going off course or losing perspective, to share the joys with, to have fun with, as well as be there in the hard times. So how? How can we build community? How do we get to that place? And one way is through the idea of hospitality. Now, we often think of hospitality being about food, and it certainly can be, and who doesn't like food? But it is more than that. We see in the Bible that God is clearly keen that we look after others, but it's more than just through food and accommodation. The Old Testament, you see God telling his people to look after strangers and those who are destitute, giving them a place to stay. There's also a requirement to look after widows and orphans who, particularly in that culture, would have not had any legal rights or any money. So, God is clearly keen that we look after others. Absolutely, that comes through the whole of the Bible. But it is more than just food and accommodation. I love this quote, and unfortunately I wrote it down and didn't write where I'd got it from, so I'm really sorry I haven't sourced it, but maybe I'll find it again at some point. But it says, hospitality is about investing in others' lives and learning how you can best serve those around you. I think that's a really good definition. Now, some of you would have been at the day where Paul Lynch was sharing with us a few weeks ago. He said a bit about hospitality, and I knew this was coming up, so I got my pen and paper out quite quickly and started writing down notes. Some of the things he said, which I just wanted to repeat here, was that actually through COVID, we kind of lost the gift of hospitality a little bit in terms of having people over to our houses, just because we couldn't, we weren't allowed to, and maybe sometimes we've kind of got used to doing that and haven't quite managed to open our homes up again. And he also talked about, which I thought was interesting, how even through lockdown we could feed ourselves with worship and teaching online, but actually what we couldn't do is the community thing, spend time with those people who are our community and have those relationships that we need so much. And I know for me that was definitely one of the things I found hard about lockdown, was just not being able to be with my friends and spend time with them. Just to repeat, we were never meant to walk with Jesus alone. Not even Jesus did it. We need each other. We looked at those verses a couple of slides ago that talk about the early disciples and how they did everything together. They formed a community, they ate, they shared communion together. And as we said, often we talk about hospitality and we do think about food, and that can certainly be a good big part of hospitality, but it's more than that. It's doing life together. It's sharing in the highs and the lows. It's serving each other, potentially practically. It's holding each other up when things are tough. It's praying for and praying with each other. It's us encouraging each other to keep our eyes on Jesus. It's being real. And this takes effort. It actually takes some effort. It's not going to happen to us. We have to participate. We have to step into this agape way of loving each other. Now, I was praying about this and asking God, kind of, what's one thing you want to say to us about this? And I thought that what God was saying is actually, yeah, if you want this, it's going to take some effort. We're going to have to step into it and do something ourselves, but also, mostly, it's going to take love. And it's only going to work if it comes from that place of agape love that we were talking about before, the one that's not expecting something back in return. I know that sometimes when we're talking about putting ourselves out for others, we can have this voice in our head which says something like, well, no one does anything for me, why should I do that? And I think that's quite common, if we're honest, that does come in, but actually that's not going to work. If we listen to that voice, we're not going to get anywhere. So we need to step out of that mindset and come from that place of agape love that doesn't expect something back, that comes from God's love flowing through us and out to those around us. I love this verse that I've put on the screen now. It's a bit of a late addition to my notes, but I saw it and just remembered that it's pretty much perfect for what we're talking about. It says, no one has ever seen God, but if we love one another, God lives in us and his love is made complete in us. It does seem to suggest that actually by loving each other, we actually experience a bit more of God's love for ourselves. And I don't know how that works. It's a bit baffling, but I kind of see it. Actually loving someone else is actually all a part of us experiencing God's love for us. It's amazing. It's one of those things that God does. It doesn't quite make sense, but it's really cool. I've got a quote here that I read. This is from a guy called Scott Hubbard, in an article he wrote called The Art of One Anothering. Let's see if any of us can relate to this. I'm just going to read it out, so bear with me looking down. I sometimes think I could be very holy if after doing my morning devotions, I just stayed in my room all day long. I find that patience, for example, comes easier by myself. Peace too. I feel a general kindness and goodwill when I'm alone. I imagine myself ready to bear others' burdens. But then I leave my room and begin interacting with some of those others face to face. And before long, I wonder where my holiness went. Patience now feels fragile. Peace goes on the retreat. My theoretical kindness finds itself unprepared for real annoyances, and my shoulders seem too weak for real burdens. People, it turns out, have an irritating way of poking the spiritual fruit on my table, only to reveal just how many of those apples and pears are plastic. Anyone relate to that at all in any way? Yeah, okay, we've got a few people waving at me, that's good. So, spoiler alert here, community is really good, but it's not always easy. Turns out, none of us are perfect. We all have our off days, moments, hours, weeks, and people can be really annoying sometimes. I'm pretty sure that sometimes I can be really annoying. And I've put a little note here, don't look at your brother right now, because he's probably nodding, but I'm not actually sure if he's here, so I might have got away with that. So I can't promise that being community is always going to be fun and laughter. It will be great, but it'll also be tough sometimes because it's full of people like me and full of people like you. Now, I'm just going to share a slide now. This is a joke. This is something I found online which amused me. Now, I sent this to a couple of friends because I thought it was funny and thought that maybe on the odd occasion it might possibly be able to be applied to me. So I'll just let you read that and see what you think of that. Okay, so yeah. So I sent this, I'm quite sure this isn't real, I really hope it isn't, but it's just a joke. But I sent this to a couple of my friends and kind of went, haha, this is really funny, isn't it? You should do something like that for me one day. And I was kind of hoping that they might respond going, no, Toni, that's not you at all. But unfortunately, they just laughed and said, yeah, that would be really good. So just a way to highlight that we're not perfect. We are going to need to bear with each other. We can be community, but we will have to do that. We'll have to bear with each other. We need to be people of grace and keep showing that agape love, not thinking about what we want in return, even though that's hard and we will naturally do it, but just try and remember it's all about loving other people. So, practically, how can we move from where we are now into deeper community? If you want more community than you have now, here are a few ideas or suggestions of ways that could help move forward. Now, this list, again, is not extensive. I'm sorry, I've probably missed some things out, so apologies for that. These are ways or things that you might be able to get involved with if you're looking for more community at the moment. There's opportunities to join small groups. There's definitely groups doing the prayer course at the moment. If you want to find out about any of these things, I suggest going to the welcome desk just in the room on the way out the door, and someone will be there and can give you more details about that. Mod, obviously, I know limited amounts about Mod because I'm not a bloke, but I know one of the visions behind Mod is to build community, to help guys particularly get to know other people. So if you're a bloke and you want to find out more about that, Jez will happily talk to you. Do you want to give us a wave, Jez? Anyone doesn't know you? There you go. He'll happily talk to you about Mod. Joining a team, I think particularly for the introverts amongst us, sometimes talking to people you don't know is a bit scary. So sometimes joining a team and having something to do with other people is a really good way to get to know people. And I think most of the teams are always looking for new helpers. Luke's got his thumbs up at me right now. So if you want to join the camera team, talk to Luke. So that's another great way to get to know people. I know there's a welcome lunch last week. Sounded like that went well. Obviously, if you want to invite people to your house, feel free. There are a few walking groups going on. I know there's a Terry's Trekkers, I think I saw it called, a guys walking group. And there's, Stuart's waving there if you want to find out about walking. Stuart's at the back there doing teas and coffees. He'll talk to you about that. There's loads of things that you can get involved with if you want to. Or maybe all you want to do this morning is talk to someone you don't know very well. Maybe that's it. Grab a coffee, say hi to someone. So shout out to the introverts. You don't have to talk to everybody all at once. It's a bit scary, isn't it? You don't have to invite everyone over to your house. That's also fine. And I know some of you are already at full capacity and just the thought of doing anything else is too much. And, that's okay. I know those of you particularly who are caring for either young children or elderly relatives or have health conditions yourself or just have a super demanding job. Just the prospect of doing anything else can be a bit much. So I'm not here asking you to do more than you're doing now. It's just about building community. So maybe today have a more in-depth conversation with someone after coffee and get past the just, hi, how's your week? Great, how's your week? Great. Maybe it's just that. Some of you might not be able to invite people over to your house, that's fine. It's okay, it's not just about that. And for those of you who already have great community and have really good, well-established relationships, let's make sure that we're open with those and we're not excluding anyone new and just making sure we're letting other people join part of the communities that we already have. I'm just going to repeat that definition we used earlier. Hospitality is about investing in others' lives and learning how you can best serve those around you. Just as I close, told you I'd go under time, Julian, that's fine. Just going to go over a couple of verses again. That one we just did a couple of slides ago, but I just wanted to show it again because I just love it. If we love one another, God lives in us, and his love is made complete in us. So, in summary, Jesus says, love each other just as I have loved you. You should love each other. This is God's love flowing through us to other people. Community is great, but it's not just going to happen to you. We do have to step in and participate with it. And there are various ways to do it. We are not perfect. We will have to bear with each other and accept each other. But most importantly, we love because God loved us first and because he is love. And if any of the rest of you have had a certain Tina Turner song going through their heads every time they see the What's Love Got to Do With It at the side of the slide, what's love got to do with it? Pretty much everything, I think, is the answer. So I'm just going to pray to finish, and then Julian, if you want to come back up with your team, that'd be great. Lord God, thank you that you loved us first. And Lord, I thank you that somehow through loving other people, we can experience more of your love. And Lord, help us as we bear with each other and love each other through our imperfections and annoyances. Lord, help us to be your community. Help us to be a community of people who love and who see each other, who support. Lord God, I thank you that we can have that. And Lord, I thank you that you will help us with it. We can't do it without you, Jesus. Thank you for our community here this morning, Lord God. Amen.